Those remains are of a young black girl, and one of our leading considerations is of the person who was reported missing, the 14-year-old girl.
This should have never happened. I'm very upset about it. This could have been my granddaughter, my daughter. This is somebody's child. I'm very pissed off about it.
When you learned that she hadn't been in school at all that day, what did that prompt you to do?
Panic.
They say all time heals all wounds. This is one I don't think will be able to be healed.
Someone got inside the house on Fuller Avenue where Christopher Whitaker raped and murdered their 14-year-old daughter, Aliana.
Before we get into the story itself, I want to first introduce you to the city where these horrific events unfolded. Cleveland, Ohio, a city that never disappeared from the map but quietly vanished from the idea of the American dream. At one point, it was an industrial giant, a city of steel, factories, and thousands of working hands. Cars were built here. Metal was poured here. Families moved in believing there would always be work. By the middle of the 20th century, Cleveland was one of the largest cities in the United States, and it honestly felt like it would never fall. But cities, like people, can break. When industry started leaving, it didn't fade away slowly. It vanished fast. Factories shut down one after another. Jobs evaporated, and those who could leave did. First, the wealthier neighborhoods emptied out. Then the middle class followed. And eventually, the people who had nowhere else to go were the ones left behind. Entire blocks went silent. Homes that were built for families became burdens. Windows were boarded up. Doors were chained shut. Some were just left wide open. Cleveland has thousands of abandoned houses. Not figuratively, literally. Some of them have been standing that way for decades. Roofs leaking, floors collapsing, staircases leading into darkness. Inside, there are traces of lives that just stopped: children's toys, old photographs, mattresses without beds. The city tried to demolish them, but there were more buildings than money and more problems than control. In neighborhoods like this, time works differently. During the day, they look deserted, almost empty. At night, they become dangerous. Vacant houses turn into shelters for the homeless, for people struggling with addiction, for criminals. There are no cameras, no neighbors, no witnesses. Police know these addresses, but they can't keep up. The list of problems is longer than the list of resources. Cleveland is a city of contrasts. Just a few blocks away from crumbling homes, you'll find well-kept schools, churches, playgrounds. Kids grow up right next to danger, and for them, it becomes background noise. They know which streets not to walk down, they know which houses to pass quickly. That kind of knowledge isn't taught in school, it's passed along in whispers. Poverty in Cleveland isn't abstract. You see it in crime statistics, in overwhelmed social services, in families living paycheck to paycheck. In neighborhoods where the state stopped being a daily presence a long time ago, where streetlights don't always work, and help either arrives too late or doesn't arrive at all. And in places like this, the sense of safety doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes slowly. First, people stop looking out their windows. Then they stop asking questions. And eventually, they stop being surprised when something terrible happens. Because a city that lives with ruins long enough starts to accept destruction as normal. Cleveland isn't just a backdrop. It's an environment, a place where neglect turns into opportunity, where the absence of control creates space for the worst decisions, and where one empty building can become the point of no return for an entire story. It was in this city, among abandoned blocks, aging houses, and streets that had long lost their former life, that a girl named Alianna DeFreeze lived. She was 14 years old, an age where childhood isn't quite over yet, but the adult world is already pressing in with expectations, pressure, and responsibilities you're not really ready for. Aliana was a typical teenager. She went to school, had friends, laughed, could be stubborn, could get upset, but she was still a kid, with that mix of innocence, trust, and the belief that the world overall is a safe place. She grew up in an environment where adults were often focused on survival, and kids learned independence early. Her parents, her mother and father, were both part of her life, even though they lived separately. Aliana wasn't an only child, but she was often described as energetic, lively, with a strong personality. She could argue, she could stand her ground, but she was also deeply connected to her family, to her parents. She wasn't just a daughter, she was part of their daily routine, their worries, their hopes. Her mother worked, trying to hold the family together in a city where stability is rare. Like so many parents in Cleveland, she lived between schedules, bills, exhaustion, and that constant feeling of having to push through. She was just a regular woman trying to give her child a normal life in very not normal conditions. Aliana's father was present too. Their relationship wasn't perfect, and honestly, whose is, especially under constant stress, but he was still her dad. People who knew the family said Aliana was cared for as much as possible within the reality they were living in. This wasn't a family with dramatic stories or headlines, no spotlight, no public attention, and that's exactly what makes it so tragically ordinary. Families like this exist on almost every block in Cleveland. Kids like Aliana leave their homes every day without ever thinking that something extraordinary, something horrific could happen to them. Aliana DeFreeze was part of this city, part of its rhythm, its routine. And at this point, her story didn't stand out at all from the thousands of other childhood stories that begin every single day in Cleveland, a city that, for a long time now, has stopped noticing just how fragile life around it can be. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Aliana DeFreeze still hadn't come home from school, and for a 14-year-old girl, that was completely out of character. Her mother, Denisha, called the school to ask if they knew where she was or why she might be running late. What she was told made her heart drop. Aliana hadn't been at school at all that day. She had left the house at 6:30 in the morning, more than enough time to get there. So why did she never arrive? The last time Aliana was seen was when she got on an RTA bus near the house at 3400 East 149th Street, the same stop where her mom had walked her that morning. From there, she was supposed to get off at East 93rd Street in the Kinsman area and transfer to a second bus to reach school. She attended E-Prep and Village Prep Woodland Hills, where she was a 7th grade student. She's never done anything like this before, her aunt said. She's not a runaway. She's never run away. She's never been in trouble. She had absolutely no reason to leave. So this just didn't fit who she was. Aliana had been attending E-Prep for 2 years. During that time, the school had introduced a new system. Parents would automatically receive notifications about their children, including alerts if a student didn't show up. But her parents never received any message. Aliana, who had developmental challenges, was incredibly loving and deeply attached to her close family, and they adored her just as much. She was bright, joyful, almost always smiling. And now the entire community was stepping in to help search for her. Thankfully, the buses she used were equipped with surveillance cameras. When investigators reviewed the footage, there she was just doing her thing, like any normal day. So the question became, what happened the moment she got off the bus? That's when something caught investigators' attention. Standing behind her was a man wearing a white hoodie, and then he followed her. The temperature was dropping. Snow had started to fall. This had suddenly become a race against time. Several special agents and intelligence analysts were brought in. Investigators needed to rebuild her entire timeline, talking to her family, friends, classmates, and teachers. What was her normal routine? Police spoke with everyone in her circle, but nothing suspicious came up. They also searched the homes of friends and relatives, but she wasn't there. And slowly, a new and terrifying possibility began to take shape. Could this have been a stranger abduction? Teams of officers were sent out to canvass the neighborhood, checking abandoned houses nearby. It was a massive task, but the police and the community were ready. They were prepared to search for as long as it took in freezing conditions to bring Aliana home. A citywide search was launched, and a reward was offered for any information that could help locate her. But just a few hours later, news began to surface, the kind everyone had been afraid of.
There's not been a positive identification of the victim found in that house on Sunday night. And until there's positive scientific evidence, we're not going to announce who that person is. We have a very strong idea based on evidence and things like that of who that person is. And we've talked to that family. We're in constant contact with that family. But until the medical examiner makes that positive identification, we don't have an announcement for that.
In reference to the individual whose remains were found on Sunday night and transported to our office, as the chief said, a positive identification has not been made. Those remains are of a young black girl, and one of our leading considerations is of the person who was reported missing, the 14-year-old girl.
Near the house at 9400 Fuller Avenue, not far from the spot where she usually transferred from one bus to another, there were several abandoned homes. They'd been neglected for years, with shattered windows and dark, open doorways, just sitting there without any oversight. Those buildings immediately caught the attention of law enforcement during the search. When one officer stepped inside one of them, the silence and emptiness quickly gave way to a horrific discovery. That's where he found her body. She was unclothed, lying in a pool of blood. The scene was so overwhelming that it hit with this instant internal shock, the kind that's hard to even process. A trail of blood led farther inside, toward the dining area. There, on a built-in bench, several tools had been laid out, including a drill and a box cutter. The way they were arranged looked unnaturally deliberate, almost chilling. The injuries she suffered were consistent with those tools. Investigators also found a shoe print inside the house, another silent detail confirming that someone else had been there. The medical examiner documented multiple severe injuries, including a broken jaw and stab wounds. The extent of the trauma pointed to an extreme level of violence. The injuries were so extensive that the examiner couldn't determine a single definitive cause of death. Her body had sustained too much damage. She ultimately had to be identified through dental records. Even that carried a kind of cruel irony. Her name had to be returned to her through medical files. News of the discovery spread through the city almost immediately. The community was devastated. People struggled to comprehend what had happened so close to home, in a place they knew. Many came to the house, leaving flowers and stuffed animals at the entrance as a way to remember her. The toys and candles became a quiet protest against something that had no explanation. The pain and anger people felt were almost physical. You could see it in the silence, in the tears, in the strained looks on people's faces. This was a vulnerable child, one of their own, part of the community, who was simply on her way to school. She hadn't done anything wrong, and that, more than anything, made the tragedy unbearable. No one could make sense of it.
Who are we here for? Aliana. Who must we stand for? Aliana. Who must we speak for? Aliana. Because she can't be here tonight to speak for herself. This should have never happened. I'm very upset about it. This could have been my granddaughter, my daughter. This is somebody's child. I'm very pissed off about it.
This is what community is about, and we appreciate the support that you're showing Aliana and her family, and I'm sure they appreciate it. I want you to know that the men and women of the 4th District, our hearts are broken because of this. This is our community too. One of our girls in this community that this happened to. We're working very, very hard to find out who did it and bring them to justice.
The case started moving fast, and not long after, urgent new details began to surface. And then, in February of 2017, an arrest was finally made.
Stay on this now and ask the question, who is Christopher Whitaker?
There are a lot of pieces of the puzzle. So anybody that has any information on this suspect, Christopher Whitaker, his whereabouts over the last week, anybody he may have talked to.
Whitaker arrested right here about 4 hours ago at the Villa Serena Apartments on Mayfield Road in Mayfield Heights by Cleveland Police and federal marshals.
44-year-old Christopher Whitaker was taken into custody at 7:15 in the evening in Mayfield Heights. He had a criminal past and was registered as a sex offender. He had previously served 4 years in prison for aggravated assault and sexual assault after he raped and brutally attacked a woman back in 2005.
Did he grabbed me around my neck and was choking me, and I passed out.
And 12 years after she was strangled, brutally raped, and left unconscious in her own home, emotional and physical scars remain.
When they found her body, it was like something came over me and said, Chris did that.
Chris Whitaker, accused of murdering 14-year-old Aliana DeFreeze and dumping her body in this vacant home, was convicted 12 years ago of sexually assaulting this woman, whose identity we're not revealing. But the original charge of attempted murder was pled down.
It's like my life didn't matter to them.
As a result, he served just 4 years in prison.
And a person can go out and sell drugs and get more time than they gave him.
Now, Whitaker's 2005 victim says the system has a second chance to get it right.
He took a kid's life, and to me, when you take a kid's life, a life for a life.
Christopher Whitaker's DNA was found on Aliana's body, as well as inside the house where she was discovered. He was questioned for several hours. During that time, he claimed he had never seen Aliana and said he hadn't even been in that neighborhood that day. He insisted he didn't know who she was at all, completely denying any connection.
Are you familiar with the girl that went missing?
I do not know anything.
You don't know her?
Once investigators laid out the evidence they had collected, his story suddenly changed.
If I was to tell you that we found your DNA inside the house in the upstairs, would that surprise you?
Probably through the kitchen, maybe.
What did you do is what I'm asking, Chris.
I turned around and it's like I punched her, but then it's like after that, it's like a blur. It's like I almost blacked out or something. I don't remember what I did. I just remember when I came through that it had happened, and I'm not a monster. I'm just an addict that made a mistake. What shouldn't have happened. She never had a chance to grow up, never had a chance to experience anything, and I took that away from her, and there's nothing I can do to bring her back. I was so high, and I was so out of my mind, and it was like I was out of character, and I got what I got coming, and I deserve it. I will write a formal apology to her family that they probably don't want to hear, but I will do it anyway. I don't want a circus made out of this. I just want to go to court and get it over with.
He claimed that she supposedly agreed to go to the house with him after he told her he was going to use drugs. According to him, it was a voluntary decision on her part, something she chose without any pressure. He said he mistakenly thought she was a sex worker despite the very obvious fact that she was wearing a school uniform. Clothing that should have immediately made her age clear, he claimed he either ignored or completely misread. Then his story went even further. He said that she supposedly took her clothes off herself and, quote, offered herself to him. After that, he claimed she suddenly attacked him. This was a key part of his version, an attempt to shift blame and reverse the roles. He insisted that the drugs he had taken that day caused a blackout, and that after that moment he remembered nothing at all, like everything just cut off in his mind. But there was zero evidence to support any claim that she attacked him. No signs of a struggle, no witness statements backing that up, no objective facts, nothing. His story didn't just sound questionable, it sounded completely fabricated. The pieces didn't fit together, they contradicted each other, and they didn't hold up to even basic common sense. If what he was saying were true, there was an obvious question. Why did a witness see Christopher grabbing Aliana before walking away with her? That detail directly contradicted his claim that everything was voluntary. The witness later explained that they didn't step in or call the police because they didn't know whether the two of them knew each other. From the outside, it could have looked unclear, and that uncertainty played a tragic role. That moment was also captured on surveillance cameras. Cold, emotionless footage became yet another piece of evidence, one that didn't rely on anyone's memory or words, silently but clearly contradicting his version of events.
Thank you. The defendant is remanded. There is no bond. It's without bond. And the case is assigned to Judge Carolyn B. Friedland. The first pretrial is set for February 22nd, 2017 at 9:00 a.m. And the court is appointing Mr. Thomas Shaughnessy and Mr. Fernando Mack to represent the defendant, Mr. Whitaker.
It was time to take the case to court, and that's when the trial of Christopher Whitaker officially began.
with his hands clasped the entire day of trial, even while the prosecutor's opening arguments described the horrific details of how Aliana DeFreeze died. Wounds made by a box cutter, putty knife, screwdriver, and electric drill. Christopher Whitaker won't contest the aggravated murder, rape, and kidnapping charges against him. The defense didn't cross-examine any witnesses, but the jury will have to endure days of morbid testimony. It seems the defense may wait until the death penalty phase to make their case. Meanwhile, Eliana's mother testified.
She never went anywhere without telling me.
When you learned that she hadn't been in school at all that day, what did that cause you to do?
Panic.
Her family did not attend, but her father did comment outside.
No matter what sentence he has or what fate he reaches, you know, they say all time heals all wounds. This is one I don't think will be able to be healed.
Whitaker's attorneys didn't dispute the version of events laid out by the prosecution. They didn't try to rewrite what happened or challenge the fact that a crime had occurred. He didn't deny that it happened. Instead, from the very beginning, the entire defense strategy focused on something else, entirely sentencing. The goal was simple: try to save him from the death penalty by shifting attention away from what was done and toward what punishment should follow. Prosecutors, on the other hand, were clear and uncompromising. They told the jury that Christopher went out that morning on the hunt for a victim knowingly, deliberately, and without any coincidence involved. That's when he came across Aliana. According to the prosecution, he abducted her and then carried out a methodical, step-by-step series of brutal acts. There was no chaos in what he did, they said, only control and intention. They also addressed testimony from a psychologist called by the defense, who claimed that Christopher's drug addiction impaired his ability to control his impulses. But prosecutors pushed back hard on that idea. Even if addiction was present, they argued, it did not erase his awareness of what he was doing. They stated plainly that he fully understood his actions that day, and to leave absolutely no room for doubt, they put it as clearly as possible. The evidence does not point to a drug-fueled frenzy. It does not point to a blackout. It points to someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The prosecution also presented the tools found inside the house, the same tools used during the killing. Those items stood as silent proof of what happened inside those walls. Together with witness testimony, they painted a tragic and horrifying picture of Aliana's final moments. A picture that was deeply difficult to hear, almost impossible to absorb, but one the jury was required to face and understand. On March 13th, the court delivered its verdict.
The court's been advised that you've reached a verdict. Ladies and gentlemen, juror number 3, Mr. Foreperson, would you hand the verdict forms to the bailiff, please? In the matter of the state of Ohio versus Christopher Whitaker, and gentlemen, you can remain seated in light of the number of forms that there are. With respect to count number 1, the aggravated murder, the verdict form reads as follows. We, the jury, in this case being duly impaneled and sworn, do find the defendant, Christopher Whitaker, guilty of aggravated murder in violation of Revised Code Section 2903.01B of the Revised Code, as charged in count 1 of the indictment. It is signed by juror number 3, the foreperson, as well as the 11 other panel members. With respect to count number 2, again, the verdict is guilty. With respect to count number 3, again, the verdict is guilty. With respect to count 4, again, the aggravated murder indicates that the defendant is in fact guilty. As to count number 5, the rape, the verdict form indicates a guilty verdict.
I don't care whether you with the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Gangster Disciples, the Mexican Mafia, they have one common denominator. They hate sex offenders and child murderers.
I never wanted this to happen, and ever since that day, I've been filled with regret and remorse. I've admitted to my guilt to the detectives and to my lawyers. I asked my lawyers not to contest or challenge anything in this case because I really wanted the DeFreeze family to have closure. I will not try to hide behind drugs or alcohol. I will not pretend or lie because it wouldn't be fair to the family. I apologize to the family and the community for my actions. There is no excuse for what I've done. I can't imagine the pain the family feels, but I know the pain I felt when I had to look at what I've done.
Because this was a case of premeditated murder with the possibility of the death penalty, the next phase for the jury was sentencing. And the question was as stark as it gets. Would he spend the rest of his life behind bars, or would he be sent to death row?
Has agreed with the jury and just sentenced Christopher Whitaker to death.
He also added another 48 years in prison for obstruction of justice, aggravated burglary, felonious assault, rape, and abuse of a corpse.
We didn't get the verdict we wanted. We preferred life without the possibility of parole, but we respect the judge's decision.
Our children mean a lot to us. They might not be your children, but they mean a lot to us. The 93rd is a safe haven for sexual predators like this monster behind me. And you're lucky I'm not the same person I was 25 years ago because there's not enough police in here to stop me. And you need to know that. And when you get where you're going, you're going to get what you got coming. Before you get to that gas, that lethal injection chamber. She would talk to me, Daddy, you showed me how to fight. I'll be okay, Daddy. I said, baby, listen to me and quit running your mouth. Don't walk with your hood on your head. Don't have the earbuds in your ear. Be aware of your surroundings. She kept running her mouth and I grabbed her. I said, that's how it's going to happen, Aliana. I said, that's how it's going to happen. Now what you going to do? Wow, Daddy, you scared me. I said, yeah. Lord, give me strength to continue on this foundation to keep my mind right and my spirit right. Excuse me, so I can look at this bitch-ass dude.
You're addressing the court, Mr. DeFreeze, not...
I said enough. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. With respect to sentencing as to the non-capital charges, Mr. Alvadal?
As for sentencing on the non-capital charges, Mr. Whitaker later filed an appeal with the Ohio Supreme Court, trying to overturn the death sentence and replace it with life in prison without the possibility of parole. This became another stage in a long legal battle, one that wasn't just about the fate of the convicted man, but about what justice would ultimately look like in this case. Aliana's father said that outcome would have been acceptable to him. For him, it wasn't about mercy, it was about the meaning of punishment itself. From the very beginning, I asked for life without parole, he said, because death is too certain and too quick. You should have to sit there and suffer thinking about what you did. The hearing was an automatic appeal, something Christopher was entitled to solely because he was on death row. It was a procedural step, but an incredibly important one. His attorney argued that Christopher's confession to police and his decision not to contest guilt during trial should have been considered mitigating factors by the jury. But that didn't happen, because jurors only learned about those circumstances later during the trial itself, not at the moment when the most critical decisions were being made. That argument was just one of 21 legal issues his defense brought before the Ohio Supreme Court, searching for any grounds to revisit the sentence. Christopher himself did not appear at the hearing. He remained behind bars, physically absent, but legally at the center of every argument. Because this was a case of premeditated murder with the possibility of the death penalty, it followed a very specific legal process. Ohio law clearly states that if no plea agreement is reached before trial begins, defendants cannot plead guilty during the guilt phase, the part of the trial where jurors decide whether the defendant is guilty or not. That procedural line became central to the defense's argument. Their position was that by the time the jury was deciding between life imprisonment and the death penalty, Christopher had already accepted responsibility and that this should have counted as a mitigating factor. The defense insisted that he wanted to take responsibility. His attorney said Christopher told police he wanted to avoid, quote, a circus around the case and hoped to give the family some sense of closure. But the prosecution pushed back hard. Assistant prosecutor Catherine Elizabeth Mullen told the Ohio Supreme Court he's tried to say that he took responsibility and partially accepted guilt. But if you look at his statements, if you listen to his jail phone calls, he denies everything there. She emphasized that this behavior didn't line up with a genuine acceptance of responsibility. He denies responsibility in many ways, she said. And this court has previously ruled that such denials negate the mitigating weight the court might otherwise give to an acceptance of responsibility. In the end, the Ohio Supreme Court unanimously upheld 2 of the 3 death sentences. That meant Christopher Whitaker remained on death row, and the original sentence stood without change. His execution was scheduled for July of 2026. However, Ohio has not carried out any executions since 2018 because the state has been unable to obtain replacement drugs for lethal injection. The system remains in limbo. Meanwhile, in December of 2018, the abandoned house on Fuller Avenue was demolished. The physical location of the crime disappeared, but the story itself never left the city's memory.
It's something that is a scar on top of a scar. The back doors were kicked open. The boards were off the walls.
Someone got inside the house on Fuller Avenue where Christopher Whitaker raped and murdered their 14-year-old daughter, Aliana. This worries Damon DeFreeze because he believes these vacant homes aren't safe, and what happened to his daughter could potentially happen to someone else.
Because lives are at stake. People don't get it. Lives are literally at stake.
Just 1 month after that, the Aliana's Alert Bill was officially signed into law and went into effect. The response was fast, almost like the system itself finally admitted that waiting was no longer an option. The new law required all schools to notify parents within 2 hours if their child failed to show up without explanation. A simple rule, but one with the power to save lives and one that hadn't existed before. At the same time, the family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, trying to force accountability, where, in their view, it had been ignored. The defendants named in the case included Christopher Whitaker, E-Prep and Village Prep Woodland Hills, the City of Cleveland, Friends of Breakthrough Schools, and the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. According to the lawsuit, each of these parties was part of a chain of events that failed to stop the tragedy in time. The lawsuit also separately named the owner of the house for failing to properly maintain, manage, and supervise the property where Aliana was found. That house, like so many others in the city, had become a symbol of neglect and danger. The family's attorney put it bluntly, unfortunately, when cases like this happen, everyone has to be held accountable. No one gets a free pass. And here, everyone played a role. The lawsuit argued that the school had clearly and unquestionably failed in one of its most critical duties to parents, the obligation to immediately notify them when a child doesn't show up. That system was supposed to work. It didn't. The filing also stated that the City of Cleveland and its employees failed to do their jobs by not monitoring or preventing illegal activity in abandoned buildings, including the very one where her body was found. Buildings that had been left open and dangerous for years. The family sought $15 million in compensatory and punitive damages, underscoring both the scale of their loss and the systemic failures behind it. Eventually, the parties reached a settlement, reportedly worth around $1 million. But even that was never the point. No amount of money could replace what was taken. What Aliana's family did after her murder is nothing short of extraordinary. In a moment when grief usually shuts people down, they did far more than anyone could reasonably expect. They turned tragedy into action, making sure Aliana's name didn't disappear, but continued to live on through service and change. In her honor, the family founded the Aliana DeFreeze Let's Make a Change Foundation, a nonprofit organization that supports low-income families, tackles the issue of abandoned homes, and works to create safer routes for children traveling to and from school. This isn't just a foundation. It's a response to a system that failed once and a promise to do everything possible to make sure it never happens again.
Tonight, Aliana DeFreeze's family will be helping other families around the holiday season. They're partnering with Toys for Tots to hand out toys to children who might not otherwise get many gifts this year.
Arielle DeFreeze is Aliana's cousin. She tells me she's keeping her spirit alive by giving others a safe place to grieve and work through their trauma. She's doing this through creating the Centers for Counseling and Trauma Recovery.
You may have seen walls of love around Cleveland or even around the country. They're filled with essential items to help people in their time of need. And today, they celebrated a really special milestone. The 500th wall and one dedicated in honor of Aliana DeFreeze.
Aliana DeFreeze was a bright, creative, joyful girl, a child who carried sincerity, imagination, and a genuine warmth toward the world around her. She was only just beginning her journey, with her entire life still ahead of her. Her laughter, her dreams, her everyday little joys, all of it was cut short far too soon. The grief left behind by her murder is a kind of pain that words can't fully capture. It's something no family should ever have to endure. It's an emptiness that doesn't simply fade with time. And yet, even in the middle of that crushing loss, her loved ones refused to let her tragedy become just another silent statistic. Instead, they chose action. Through education, advocacy, and real community involvement. They built a legacy in her name, one with purpose and real impact. A path focused on protecting other children, on prevention, on awareness, and on responsibility in those efforts. Aliana doesn't disappear into the past. Her light keeps living on in every step taken to keep others safe. This was a crime that should never have happened. An event that left a deep wound, not only in one family, but across an entire community. But from that devastation came a determination to create change, quiet, persistent, and necessary change. And maybe that's the strongest testament to a young life that should still be here today, living, growing, and dreaming. Thank you to everyone who watched this video and stayed with us until the end. We truly hope this story mattered to you and gave you something to think about. And if you'd like to support our channel and help us continue creating content like this, please don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, share it, and subscribe. Your support really does matter.